am Judy and I'm the Running So-and-so and welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a long time no see. So when Jess from So What If I Sew said, I'm going to do this challenge about sewing something new, I'll put the proper name for the challenge down here. I honestly can't remember it because my life has been so ridiculously busy. But when she said she's got this challenge to try something new and she'd set aside the last week of June, I thought, do you know something? I'd love to help Jess do that. And it will get me going on the vlogging again. And I have been picking the camera and putting it down and picking it up and putting it down. And I have got videos ready to do. Yes, alongside the challenge for people saying something new, has asked some of us vloggers if we wouldn't mind showing and sharing techniques with you. Now, as I have shared with you several times, I have done City and Guilds fashion, and that did involve an awful lot of techniques. I'm going to show you how to do these techniques, or the ways that I have done them, the ways I've done them for years, and I don't intend to change because they work for me. I'm doing zip. I am going to do for you a lapped zip, which is what many years ago we used to call the concealed zip. And I'm going to do the semi-concealed zip, which is the one with a double flap on it. They were the ones that were in all the patterns when I was learning to sew. And then I'm going to do you the concealed zip, which I used to call the invisible zip, which was never very popular as I was learning to sew, and it was only when I started doing my City and Guilds that I picked up the invisible zip. I'd like to do an exposed zip. I'm going to do the open-ended zip, which is so straightforward. So the one thing I recommend for all zips is that you sew up the seam, and I'm going to say that for everyone, because if you sew up the seam, you know you're going to get it in exactly the right place. So the top and end bottom of the zip are going to be in the right place. This is the way I do it. So you literally, I have got some fabric here which has been neatened on the overlocker, and then I'm going to just create the seam. I'm going to do the seam at 1.5 centimeters. And I will just pause you while I thread up the machine and then we'll go. So you do the first part. So this is my seam, my ordinary, say the back of the dress seam. Just a nice standard, I've got it on here, a 2.5 stitch length. Get to this point, then I'll put my securing stitch in. So my securing stitch is just to go back 3 or 4 stitches, come forward 3 or 4 stitches, back to the pin. Then I turn up my stitch length. Used to go to 4, now I go just a little over 4. And it's a machine basting stitch up to the top of where I want my zip to finish, and that's all I do. I will take that off. It will put a securing stitch in. I'm really sorry for the background noises. Poppy is in a gallop mode. And I will then go to, I'm using odd coloured thread and odd coloured fabric because I want you to be able to see. I've actually got orange zips. So we open this up, and that it is really important at this point that that seam is ironed. That is crucial. For the lapped, for the semi-concealed old-fashioned one, we've got 2 flaps. I'll find out its proper name and pop it in. And the concealed zip, this is how you start with your seam constructed. And the reason I say that the seam needs constructing is that the idea of the zip is that it's going to bring together two sides of the fabric. We used to call, when I was growing up, the semi-concealed zip. So obviously your zip needs to go in shortly down from the top, obviously, so you can allow some turnover, but you don't want too much. If I turn over here, I've got too much. So usually the tape will take you to, you've got your 1.5 there, but just give yourself enough to put a hook and eye in. Now this old-fashioned semi-concealed zip is now known as the centered zip. And what I'm going to show you now is a technique that you need to learn because you'll use it on other zips. It is where you roll the zip back on itself like so, and you can see, I'm going to use the tip of a pin. You see the tip of this pin? Yes. You've got a line here of the teeth of the zip, and you've got the seam. And the teeth of the zip needs to lie directly over the top of the seam. And you lay them in place and you put in your pin. tack that one in, and I'm literally just going to tack all the way down each side and across the opening at the bottom. So it'll be along here, across and back up this side. So I shall come back to that one in a minute. It's a point on my work which is going to be the edge of the fabric, and I've put the seam guide there to the edge of the fabric. So let's put the stitch length back up again, and let's hope to goodness that this works well. Otherwise I shall not be a very happy person tonight. Okay, off we go. Really slow and steady. If you've got a machine control, speed control, use it. It's going to be good. And you could always draw on using a friction pen or a tailor's chalk guide, a line to sew on. Anything like that that will ensure that your machine stitching is dead straight. That is the secret for these particular zips. Now, there we go. I've kept a nice and straight, steady line, and I'm going to go off. I know the machine is not. Right, and you're looking for a similar side going back up the other side. You just imagine this done in a nice simple matching thread. I've obviously used black because I want you to be able to see exactly what I'm doing, being careful not to ensure that there are no puckers due to the tacking. As there's going to be a pucker here because of the tacking, so I'm going to release this tacking thread here to release any tension on the fabric, which I've managed to do. Now I've just released this one does. Right, so the lap zip. With the lap zip, you only sew on one side, one piece of the fabric. There's 3 seams to a lap zip and only one actually on the top side of the fabric. And you have to decide which side you want your flap on. If I sew half the zip onto this flap side of the seam allowance, the flap will be on this side. So the flap will be on that side, which is normally the side I like it. But if you want the flap on the other side, you sew your seam allowance on your side of the zip onto the other seam allowance, and then this will be the flap side. So what you do is, you open up the zip like so, and you fold back the fabric like this. You see the fabric folded back? Like, there we go. So you fold back the fabric like so. And you can turn it over and lay it flat. You put the teeth of the zip right up to the seam allowance. It's a bit like a fly zip, but it's not. And it's great because these 2 seams are on the seam allowance, but you don't need to tack. So now I need to pop my zipper foot in. Now I think zipper foots are fairly standard in that you've got the bit that goes on the fabric and you've got space here to swing the needle in and out. My screen, and you must remember when you're sewing a zipper that you need to move your needle to the side, and you will have on your machines something that looks like this that allows the needle to move across. And if you look up here, you can see mine is moving. and it has moved to the far side. I always go as far as I can, and I know that I'm safe. I'm just going to give myself a little caveat here and say that I'm not used to doing tutorials like this. This is a first. If we all have to step out of our comfort zone occasionally, everybody, this is definitely me stepping out of my comfort zone. Now, I've got a nice long stitch. The reason I sew with a longer stitch is it allows you to take things out more easily. And for that reason, I find 350 to 375 a brilliant size stitch. So I'm going to start by sewing up here. Obviously, it's going to do a little loop as it goes around the bottom of the zip there. And you're literally just sewing down here. You don't need to worry if it moves. It just doesn't matter. You are on the seam allowance and your stitching will not be seen. It's years and years since I've done a zip like this, and I'm really quite enjoying this. I'm not going to enjoy doing the centered zip, but the lap zip is such good fun. I think you all might want to have a go at doing this, just to show that you've done it. Just to say, I can do it, it's so easy. The next bit on this is that you pull back here, like so, and you can do this with your hands. You are pulling and you are sewing along this little bit here. Can you see that? There it is. Let me see if I can. We'll find a pointer for you. You're sewing on this little tiny bit of seam allowance, and it's the seam allowance that you've folded back. But the needle needs to swing to the other side of your zipper foot. Sometimes on my Elna the zipper foot slides and off you go. Now this does need to be quite a smart stitch, nice and steady, because this is the stitch that you will see on your lapped zip. And what you're doing is you're just moving the zip off center by stitching it to the seam allowance. You see, you don't need to tack this one. Do you know, I remember doing this. I did it at the City and Guilds course, but this is the zip that my sewing teacher at school that I talk about, Mrs. Barnaby. She taught us how to do this. Wouldn't let us do those centered seams, zips. Off we come. Now, I've opened it up, and if I open it back this side, this is the side that I've done all the stitching on, and it just doesn't matter if that is wonky at all, because you're not going to see it. But what I am going to do before I sew it down is I'm going to iron this again, and I will then come back to when it's ironed, and then I will show you, and it is really important at this point that you tack, because you are going to then have to get out your seam gauge, and this is the tricky bit of the lap zip. You have got to make certain that your stitching is parallel with that seam. Similarly, when you sew up the centered zip, you are making certain that your stitching is parallel with this one. Now these zips are the ones that had stitching on the top, the centered and the lapped zip, which is why the concealed zip is the most enjoyed zip ever, because everything is sewn on the seam allowance and there's no external stitching that you see. But with an invisible or concealed zip, whichever word you choose to describe it, you need to remember you've got to get those two pieces of fabric to join properly, and if you don't get your stitching by the side of those teeth as accurately as you can, you will notice a little wobble in it. But I'm going to rest assured and tell you now, you can undo that stitching and redo it. I have, and it works, even on dresses for women. Now I'm going to sew up the lapped zip, and as you can see, I've still got on my seam guide, the zipper foot. Now I've moved the zipper needle over because I can't sew from the top down because the thing is on the wrong side because of the little knobble on my sewing machine. I'm going to go up backwards because it will work backwards, and I need to have the needle over as far as I can. I could probably take it back one, but we'll worry about that when we get to that point. So I'm going to start nice long stitch, and remember this is a decorative stitch which is going to go on the top of your work. So you start and you literally go across the bottom. Now I think that's about right there, so I'm going to have a little look. and it is if I just push this out slightly here. And what I want to do is I want to line up my seam guide with the seam line of the zip. And you see here, there's the seam line. So this seam guard here will sit in there as I sew. And I am now going to attempt to sew it while you are watching. And hopefully my hands won't get in the way. As again, I've got slow and steady saves the day. Keeping that seam guide in the line of the seam. Sounds ridiculous, seam guide in the line of the seam. The seam guide is going in the ridge created by the seam where the zip will be. Little pull to make sure you don't get any puckers in it. And as I say, using these seam guides will ensure that you get straight lines. People call them quilting guides. They're basically a seam guide. They help you sew in a straight line when you're sewing a random line of stitching in the middle of a piece of fabric. And there we go, up to the end here. And we'll stop there. The next thing I will need to do is to remove the tacking and open up the seam. And there you have the lapped zip. It needs an iron now, but as you can see, if you open it out, you've just got that little stitch there, line of stitching that you see inside. Obviously, you will be sewing it in matching thread with a matching zip. Now the next zip I'm going to show you is the concealed zip, or the invisible zip. Obviously, when I first learned, as I keep telling you, I learned it as a concealed zip. Now we call it an invisible zip, and it is the most used of the zip. Now on Instagram, I was asked when I put the post up that I was doing this, would I spin without an invisible zipper foot? So I'm going to do that. I'm actually going to go one stage further, and I'm actually going to put that one in using my old Elna machine, the seam. My scissors today. You should be able to see the seam. So I am going to lay this over the top here, like so. Spin it round, roll the zip back. There it is. I've put this down. That pin is roughly in the right place. Now I know that there are instructions on putting in an invisible zipper with the two sides of the fabric neatened, and you put it down one side and you put it down the other. That will work. I've never done it. I can't say if it works or it doesn't. I have never done it. This is the way that I was taught. So I'm going to flip it back over like so. So I'm going to put my thumb where the pin is, as you've seen me do before, roll the zip back and catch it down. And there is a seam line in the centre of the zip. I don't really want to put my hand up to see if I can get the camera to go. Hold on a minute. There we go. Let me move it over. Really sorry trying to be cameraman. Oh, that's even better. You can really see it now. Can you see that lovely seam line just here? That must line up with your seam line there. That is the opening of your zip, and you need that to be right over the centre here. And the blessing of these zips is that you are sewing it in on the seam allowance, and the stitching does not go on the top fabric, only the seam allowance. So it's a question of rolling it down like so. You go so far, and you literally put your hand underneath, flip it over, and you put another pin in. Now, what I'm going to do now is, and put this pin in, and we know this one's in the right place, is to take the first pin out and just double check back to make certain I'm laid up. No, I'm not lined up over it. You can't see the angle that I can see, and it is very, very slightly out. So I'm just going to twist it round, and you will get the confidence to lay it flat. Now, some of you might think this is a long, cumbersome way of doing the zip. It works. Just remember, sewing is just sometimes about taking your time and being very patient. So I shall continue to work down the zip, laying the centre seam of the zip over the center. On the invisible zipper foot, you've got your stitching line here, a very small hole, and these two little ridges here, which is where the teeth for the zip will slide. It does make it easier. Don't necessarily know if I can be convinced about getting the same result, but it's certainly easier, because when I was taught to do this, you have to roll the teeth back on themselves. So I've taken out the machine line of stitching, and I'm now going to undo the zip, ready to sew it. But when I get to the bottom here, what I've done is I've sewn up and secured above the bottom of the zip. The bottom of the zip is here. I've secured up about 1 inch above it. And what you need to do is to slide this, and this, the reason I've done this is to help get it a really nice finish at the end. As you bring the zipper down, I wish they had WD-40 on them, but that would make oil on our clothes. You put the tab of the zip down and you push it through to the other side. Now you will come into line with your tacking, but don't panic. And you need to pull it through. I don't put the tacking here, but it will be okay, there we go. So the zip, the bottom of the zip is way out of reach of the stitching, because the end of the zip is there and the tab of the zip is down there, and it should allow us to stitch more freely. I'm going to start with this side, and as I've said before, it's really important with these invisible zips, what you are trying to do is to roll back this part, these teeth, so that you've got a really lovely close, you're wanting this seam to be as close to the teeth of the zip as possible, and that is what creates the invisibility on this particular zip. Now you don't have to go as far as the stopper of the zip. There is the seam. You can't see it yet, it's not come into focus. It is just here. So I'm going to sew down as tight as I can to it. So what we need to do now is we need to slide back the zip tab. And here we go. Ta-da! One perfect invisible zip, and even the bottom here doesn't need anything doing to it. Ta-da! I am so pleased with that. That is how you do a perfect invisible zip. You just have to tack it in. You have to unroll the seams. It's very similar to the way that a lot of you already do your invisible zips. Right, as promised on Instagram, I am going to do an invisible zip using a zipper foot, and not an invisible zipper foot, or a concealed zipper foot, whatever you wish to call it. But I'm going to do it on my old mechanical sewing machine. So as I said, you need to undo the zip all the way down, and you need to feed your zipper tab through the bottom, like so. And if you've got any kind of dress or anything like that, you will be able to lift it back up just through the tacking, and you need to be able to feed it through here. Maybe it needs to come down a little bit more. There we go. It just takes a little bit of jiggling, because you need this bit out of the way of sewing. There we go. Now, here goes. Wish me luck. Apologies for the background noises. Today, the girls have got... Maggie's got a ball. I'm really sorry. It's very, very noisy. I must show you this zipper foot. It's absolutely classic. Very classic 1970s zipper foot. Look at this, it's hilarious. I'll come down a little bit. Now I do hope you can see it. Look, if you want to go to the other side, it's got a little lever on it and you just go like this. Push it back. Oh, now why is it not doing it? There you go. Push that way and that way. It's so clever. Right. So again, a nice stitch that you can get it. If this doesn't work, it's not going on the vlog. But you have to really open up the teeth. The teeth have to lie flat when you're doing this with an ordinary zipper foot, and you are sewing so close to the edge, and you've got to get it flat. Now, I don't know how good it will be all the way down, bearing in mind that the last time I probably put a zip in with this sewing machine was probably when my son was a baby. I made quilts on it. No, I didn't make quilts on it. I did quilts by hand in those days. But the zipper has to go flat. All my samples for my City and Guilds were done on this machine. Oh, were they not? Just trying to think. No, they'll have been done on the 1090. Oh God, that's going back a little bit, that sewing machine. Yeah, when David bought me a Bernina 1090 when Tristan was a baby. That's as far as I need to go here. Lift it up. I'm not going to finish it off. I'm not going to look, I'm just going to do the other side. This part of the zip here, the teeth roll over, as you can see further down here. And you need to fold them back so they are flat on themselves as you sew. And that allows you to sew as close to the teeth as possible. Now, as I mentioned when I did the last one, acquiring the zipper, invisible zipper foot for my sewing machine was quite a recent purchase. And for many years I just did this because this is how I was taught. Obviously you can't go to the end. That's the whole point with this particular way of doing the zip. Next thing we need to do now is to pull this little tab through. And it is just the reverse of what you did earlier. You have to be able to sling it back through there, and then you should be able to just pull it up, and there you are. Now, seriously, this has gone in first time. It has gone to the top, and that, I would say, was a more perfect insertion of the zip than using the invisible zipper foot on the big Bernina. I'll leave you to make your own judgments, but that was the first time, and I'm really, really chuffed, seeing as this sewing machine is quite old now. I'm really, really pleased. The exposed zip. The exposed zip, you've got to think as if you're doing a bound buttonhole. So you mark on the length of your exposed zip. Now the zip I have to use, which is going to be exposed, is this one here, and it actually measures up at just over 5 inches. But actually, because I want this little opening thing here just to be just into the zip, but I'm not bothered if the end of the zip goes out, because you can just bind up the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark on 5 inches on this piece of fabric, and I'm going to use a friction pen. I think I might need to get some more friction pens, but I'm actually going to extend it by just coming up to 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to put on, now the end markers should only be 1/2 centimetre. I'm actually going to go and do this bigger than it needs to be, so that you will see some of the zip taping, because that can be a feature of it, to see more taping. So at the end, I'm actually going to mark an inch bar at that end, and I'm going to go back to this end, and I'm going to mark an inch bar at this end. And you should be able to see the mark I've got for my zip there. Now, I do have to cut this through here, and then it has to be folded back on itself, because this is just one piece of fabric. And I have to cut some little bars here. Now, I am going to cut my little bars down, and this is the bit that is very tricky, because you have to cut them to the corner here. Here and here. So I'm going to, because they're 1/2 inch on each side. In fact, I actually don't want it that size. Just rethink, Judy. Let's go for a bar of 1/2 inch here. That's better. So we're going to go up by 2/8 of an inch. I'm doing this in inches. You can do this in centimetres. So you'd be thinking 1.5 centimetres, or just do it as a centimetre across here. So it's 1/2 centimetre there, 1/2 centimetre there, and 1/2 centimetre there. The closest I can get with this particular device is 2/8 of an inch. And then you need to draw a little diagonal line, because that is where you're going to cut. Now, the best thing here is that I am now going to iron on some interfacing. And we all know that with a friction pen, you're likely to use your marks. So let's just hope to goodness I can find the marks afterwards. Failing that, I'll have to put them back on again. So I have two very small pieces. I have a small piece here of iron-on Vilene. I need to check the temperature on my iron. I'm going to put this one over the top here, like so, and you can still see the markings through it. And I'm going to put this one on here, like this. The reason being is that you want to iron and glue these wee corners here. These little corners here need to be ironed very, very carefully. Well, cut into. These corners will be cut in very carefully. And they are the things that could, as we all know, fray away. I think I need to enter Sew New in June, because it's such a long time since I've done one of these zips. It seriously is. And guess what? Yes, I have lost my line. I've sewn these on, so I'm going to draw the line again. Somewhere. So this is now opened out. Fold it back, make certain you've got your line over your line, hold it up to the light. I can't see through, I'm just going to trust me, I'm holding it up to light. It is fine. Little tiny snip. And then it is folded back. Now I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to leave the camera running. So I'm going as far as that point there, and I'm going to cut into the corner. Cut into the corner again. I'm going to cut down here. There we go. Into the corner there, and around and into the corner here. Now, I'm just going to iron those two pieces of Vilene down again. Now I've had a brilliant idea and I've just got to go and find something, so I'm just going to stop. Alterations last weekend, and it was a pair of curtains for a very good friend that I've had for many years, who's just moved house and needed her curtains taking up. So let's move this one around here, hold it down there, fold it back. It is very, very narrow. Okay. Got Maggie looking at me here, wondering what's going on. And I've actually created quite a large opening for my zip, probably larger than I wanted, but you will be able to see what it is that I've been trying to achieve. Now I'm not 100% happy with that bit. Oh, that's why. There we go. There we are. And then you have to create a really tiny hem by folding it in again, like so. And I do believe I might have everything backwards here, so please forgive me if I'm going over you. I'm just going to do this bit by bit. And making these very small hems is not easy, because the next thing I have to do is to put this through my sewing machine. Oh, the memories are flooding back because I've opened the zip back, and you don't have to hem these bits. They don't need hemming. They will be secured by when you sew the zip on in place. But what you have to do is to make certain that this gap here is the same all the way through. So I'm going to get out my little square that I used to measure, lay it underneath, and it should be 1/2 inch. So I need to find a nice, safe 1/2 inch, and it is just about 1/2 inch. I can't believe that. Let me have a look here. At the end is not. This is not at this end here. See if I can get you to. So what you need to do, I'm going to show you this. This opening should be 1/2 inch, because that's what I made it, 1/2 inch all the way down. But at this end it's 3/8 of an inch. And at this end, let's iron this bit back here. Again, it is, I think, it is not. Oh no, this one is, but this one isn't. So all I can think is that I need to make an extra deep snip, a deeper snip on one of these corners. So I'm just going to give it a tiny snip there, and a tiny snip here. I think this is the bit that's not quite right. Again, we're going back to the measure twice, cut once, add it and fold it back, and there you can definitely see that now we have a zip that's quite, but we have to make certain that we don't get it widening in the middle. It's not the easiest of zips to put in, but I have to say it's such fun doing it again after all these years. I don't know if it's meant to be fun. Right, there we go. Let's give it a little pull. Oh, look at that. That is really, really good. So I'm really pleased with that. And the next thing I need to do is to take my zip and to put it over the opening of the zip. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to center it over the 2 pieces of seam allowance that we've got here, the 2 openings that I've cut back, this one here and this one here. I'm going to put it over. Now my zip appears to be 1 inch wide. Let's just check it, shall we? And it is. I mean, that is total cheating, but there you go. I'm showing you it's 1 inch wide. And what I'm going to do now is going to stop. I'm going to go back over to where the line, and I'm going to stop, and I'm going to pin it down, and I will tack it. Now we are going to put in the exposed zip. So I am going to pin to the seam allowance the very edge of the tape. I'm going to pin it. And as you can see here, we have our exposed zip. Now, if I'm being honest, it doesn't lay entirely centrally, and it is this side. So I'm going to pull this one over, and I'm going to have a little look and see what I've done. So I'm going to relax it a little, and it might be that it needs to come forward a little bit. Let's have a look. Let's try it now. Yes, There we are. Can you see this side needs to come back? Maybe back a little bit. Does that one need to come forward? Oh, do you know, I think I'm doing this from the wrong side. Right, so now I'm going to sew in place the exposed zip. And I'm actually using the little sewing machine because it's the one that's turned on at the moment. And I've never been fussed, you know, if whichever sewing machine's on and I need to sew, I'll use that one. I am going to get the big one out again in a minute. Oh, she's running really lovely. Don't know if you can see it very well through there. Right. So I've done that first side. I'm just going to stop. Right, what I'm actually doing is I'm sewing really close to the edge because I'm going to do the top stitching option. And I just want people to realise that it doesn't matter whether you've got a big fancy machine or not. Just the basic simple machines will do exactly what you want them to do. So now I'm going to fold it out and we're just going to have a little look at it. And I'm really, really pleased with that. To do the top stitching option to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back in and I'm going to risk top stitching it without tacking. Now if this goes wrong, this is why you tack. So off we go. I'm hoping that you can see. So the top stitching needs to be, and the other thing you can do with your zipper foot is you can use your zipper foot for top stitching because you can sew quite close to the edge. Here you will see, oops, just here you will see that I've taken out the stitching at the bottom of the zip here, and I'm going to pull back this little tab here. I don't believe that's happening. That's my active fry telling me my dinner's ready. And I now can put in a pin, if I can reach one, here, just to hold it in place. Well, actually I'm going to have another look at it. I'm going to bring it round here so you can see it at this end. I'm going to tweak it to make certain it's as neat as possible. I'm going to pop a little pin in here like so, and I will then be able to sew across there. Now I have put in here the zip. I have one of these zips that I bought from this zip company that doesn't work properly, and I put that one in here. So unfortunately I will not be able to open up the zip, and therefore I won't be able to sew across the top here. So I'm going to ask you to imagine it, but I'm going to put the work back into the sewing machine and I'm just going to sew across the bottom of the zip here. There's a lot to be said for not doing your reversing stitching because you add bulk to the seam. But this is a test. I hope you have understood the principle of putting in your exposed zip. It isn't the easiest zip to do, but that's another one done, and I'm really, really pleased with it. The next one I'm going to sew up is and we don't need the seam guide, this one, is the exposed zip. And literally, you are sewing one simple line of stitching up the side here, and you're going to get it as close to the edge as possible. And I've got my needle in stitch position 5. I'm going to stop here because it is painfully slow. And coming up to the top here. Now, there's two things you can do when you get to the top and you've got the knobble of the zip. You can just lift up your foot and open the zip. Lift that up and open the zip, which will go past. Like so. Down we go and carry on stitching, and you will not have your stitch seam line interrupted by the zip tab. Now you can, if you wish, do an extra line of stitching and make it more decorative. If you've got a decorative stitch on your machine that you really like using, then why not? Down here, once you've sewn it, do a line of decorative stitching. Do you know, I might just do that very quickly for you, because it's only it's a tutorial one. So again, the tab of the zip is coming up. I could undo it. I don't want to. So what I'm going to do is lift the needle up again. It's a really good trick to learn. Pick it up from behind. There you go. And this is really the method that we used in the Kelly anorak when we did that last year. I'm going to come down to the bottom here. Don't forget, even on this open-ended zip where I could actually take it off, I'm still going to end up with a tab. So it's best keeping the zip closed, because then you can move the tab up and down as you require it. Right, let's pull the tacking out from here. And pull the tacking out on this side here. Tacking, yes, it is difficult to get it out, and it does require a little bit of teasing at times. But as I hope I've demonstrated here sufficiently, you are able to really sew a really close, secure, fine seam by having tacking. And look at that. Is that not just fantastic? Well, I do hope you've enjoyed my foray into zips, and you have perhaps learnt something about how I put a zip in. Please, as I said earlier on, these are the ways I put my zip in. And the biggest tip I can give you for any zip, if it's, you know, like invisible, lapped, uncentered, if you can sew up that seam, or even if you're doing your open-ended zip and you want it to go over the sides, you want it to have flaps on it, sew that seam up. You're joining two pieces of fabric together. You're putting an opening in two pieces of fabric. They have to be level. So I'm just going to turn the camera down, and then I'm just going to show you all the zips here. So there they all are in front of me. We have my exposed zip. We have the lap zip, and I'm really sorry I haven't taken the tacking out of it yet. We've got the centered zip. We've got the exposed zip. Do you know, I am so pleased with that exposed zip. Mainly because I've done it on the old Elna sewing machine, which, as I've said to you, is really precious. We've got the invisible or concealed zip put in using my invisible zipper foot on my Big Bonina. And then we've got, as promised to somebody on Instagram, we have here at the very end, and this is another one that I'm really chuffed with because I used the Elna. I put that one in just with a zipper foot. So that's the end of day 6 of Sew Something New in June, which is being shown on the 3rd of July. I hope you've enjoyed what I've done. I promise I will have a vlog up again soon, but just to make matters more interesting, I'm about to hit birthday season with my 2 children. So I hope you're all well, have a lovely weekend, enjoy this challenge, and just remember, whatever you sew, it's new, whether it's in June or not. See you again soon. Bye bye.